Hey, closet busters and bold move makers. It is time once again for Life Uncloseted. So I want you to gather around because it is time once again to kick down those closet doors of your life. We're here to escape our BS, explore our fears, and elevate our self-expression. I'm your host, Rick Clemens. I'm the bold move expert and that coming out guy who's going to take you to the party, the pulpit, the wake, and back to the party of living your life uncloseted. So come on along with me and grab hold of yourself and get ready to step out, step up, and step into facing your fears, making your bold moves, and living life without apologies. Now let's get to the show. Hey, Life Uncloseted family. It's me, Rick Clemens, the host of Life Uncloseted. And once again, we are stepping out, stepping up, and stepping into living our lives uncloseted. And today we're going to go down one of those favorite trails that you guys all enjoy. We're going to be talking to some musical guests here that are breaking some ground with their first album. And what I love about it is, well, besides they're handsome guys, I love that they have this name called They Won't Win. And I think it's so poignant in this day and age of, well, kind of what we're going through in our country, at least, that it seems like everybody thinks they have to win. And sometimes when they have to win, it infringes on other people's rights and stuff. And what I love about what these guys are doing is they're taking some of these things head on, as well as they're really looking at the hardships and things that happen in life, everything from domestic partner violence and exploring the LGBTQ acceptance stuff to really taking the healing power of music and bringing it forward. Their first album is called Lost at Sea. And I'm going to shut up and bring them on because I want They Won't Win to really tell their story and share with us. So welcome, Danny and Greg, Danny Cohen and Greg Lanier. Thanks for being part of Life Uncloseted podcast today, man. I appreciate you guys.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Okay, so we're done. That's all we do. We got the big intro done, and then we cut you guys loose, and we'll just put your video up on my website and all that good stuff. So, but no. I'm excited about this because I started to look at the stuff once. Dalen, your PR guy, sent it over to me. I thought, this is really kind of cool. You guys are tackling some tough stuff head on, but let's kind of do what most interviewers do. Let's go back to where it all began. How did you guys start working together?
Yeah, sure. So we connected well over a decade ago now. We were in Chicago. When neither of us are from Chicago originally, that's another part of the story. But we connected,
I think the accent gives it away.
Yeah, I was going to say the accent kind of gives it away on you for sure.
Probably. Maybe I just do a really good fake British accent.
There you
go. We were having dinner with our families, and I think I spotted your guitar, Greg.
Yeah.
And there's always that like nervous moment where you spot another musician and you think, oh, it'd be great to get together and play, but
it's like dating, you know. You're kind of
it
like,
is.
Will we click? You know, do we like the same stuff?
Yeah.
You know, it's very similar.
Will he be like so much like just on a whole different level, and I'll just be really embarrassed, or the other way around? But we got together and started to play some tunes, and we realized pretty much immediately that our voices and our style was such a good match.
So I picked up the guitar, and he said, just play one of your favorite songs. And there's a tune by Crowded House called Fall at Your Feet that I just love. And I started to play it, and he came in with harmonies, and we just immediately loved the way that sounded together. And so years later, you mentioned the name They Won't Win. Right. That's how we came up with our name. So there's a lyric from a Crowded House tune in Don't Dream It's Over where they talk about they come to build a wall between us, but you know that they won't win. And so we wanted that to be a nod to that first little moment.
That's cool. It's so interesting when the universe kind of just aligns these things, and then it happens, and years back down the road, you look back and go, wow, this is where we came from. You know, it's an interesting space, you know. And today that we're recording this, I just shared with the guys offline, and those of you who listen to the podcast know that today is the 400th episode. And not this one we're recording, but today that we're recording it. And here's the irony of this whole thing. You know those little Facebook posts that you get if you're a Facebook person, and that says, here's a memory from, you know, whatever. Well, 10 years ago, yesterday, when that popped up on my feed, was when I started my journey to become a life coach. And it was 10 years after I came out of the closet. And if anybody had told me 20 years ago, because this is the 20th anniversary. I don't know if it's actually today. I know it's somewhere in this time range that I came out of the closet to my wife, because it was at the end of September 20 years ago.
Wow.
But if anybody had told me 20 years ago that that moment would have led me to where I am today, doing these kind of podcasts and working with people coming out of the closet and working with organizations and individuals to like step out of the closets of their life and dump their excuses, their fears, and really say, I'm going to live an unapologetic life, I would have said, fuck you. You don't know what you're talking about. But it's so interesting to look back. And I can imagine for you guys, as you come to this beautiful moment of your first full albums out and everything, there's got to be some moments where you're like, wow, I can't believe this actually happened. So, Greg, I'm going to ask this question to you.
Sure.
What's been something that you feel like this relationship has done for you personally that's made you a better person?
That's a great question. I think any creative pursuit, whether you're doing, interviews and podcasts, or you're making music, or you're writing a book, or you're doing visual arts, or all that kind of stuff, I think there's always that line, and I'm sure you deal with this, in your 400 podcasts, and I bet there's been an evolution of how much of yourself you actually reveal and how much of yourself you actually put out into the world. And it's kind of a continuum of, I think, bravery and courage of kind of figuring out where are you comfortable, and that changes, and it's okay that it changes over time. But I think if there's one big thing that this relationship and working with Danny on these songs has brought to the fore for me is the some additional courage to tell my stories and to put myself into these songs. I've written songs since I was 17, but I've never written an album that is so intensely personal, with the idea that, hey, if I went through this, maybe others have gone through this, and maybe it can help others understand they're not alone.
And I do think that's something that comes down to this personal stuff. And about a couple months ago, so July of this year, I spoke on one of the biggest stages I've ever spoke on. It was about 1,500 people in the, well, I've spoken in front of larger, but this one was like it was like a biggie, because I knew a lot of the people in the audience. I've been going to this conference myself for years. And some people knew my story. Quite a few of them did, actually, out of the group, but I never had laid it on the line the way I did. And to bring your raw truth to those spaces, it is a growth thing. As you mentioned, throughout the years, from if I go back to the very first podcast and listen to it and to what I do now, not only is there growth and evolution and, you get better at what you're doing, but the willingness to open up and share these sort of things. So
that's where the good stuff is, right?
It is. It really is. Danny, for you, as you've kind of gone through this too, what have you seen that's caused you to like, okay, I'm going to push? Are there certain things that you feel like you pushed in this journey too, that you're stepping out of your shell or out of your comfort zones?
For sure. I kind of think of our journey, sort of writing songs and producing songs together as, in a way, sort of cathartic. I think that we all have stuff that we've experienced and witnessed that we can find really hard to talk about, and so Greg is my music husband, as we joke, but our writing together really is sort of built on this foundation of friendship that has become deeper and deeper and sort of grown over many years. And so there's a certain level of trust that I think we have to have with each other, where we, with our lyrics, we want to tell stories that are reflect our own experiences, but also that help other people think about their own lives. And so the challenges that we've each faced in different ways, I think the music has sort of helped us cope, deal with, and process, reflect on.
It takes you to a different space. And, I mean, some of the stuff that I talk about on stage, some people are like, wow, I can't believe you actually share that stuff. And it's not for everybody. I mean, I think that's the beauty of this. But I also feel like, kind of like music, if you've been given this talent to be able to do something, then do it. And not everybody's going to be able to talk about infidelity and the cheating and stuff like I am capable of doing. And I'm not doing it like, oh, look at me, I'm this great guy. But I do it because I feel like there's so many people out there in the world, especially in the LGBTQ community, who have struggled through this of, okay, I can't be this because everybody wants me to be this. And if they can connect with someone that can go, wow, they did that. Or wow, and you guys are talking about some tough stuff too, and we're going to get into that next. That if I can help one person go, okay, I now identify. It's not just me. I'm not alone. And then I feel like I've done what I was put on the planet to do. And again, it's not coming from an ego space. It's just I want to help people who feel like they are alone in this, yet they really aren't. So as you guys started to put the lyrics and stuff together and the songs and everything, was the conscious decision like, and I know this is a stupid question, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
No, it
Was there a lot of conscious decision behind, okay, we are literally going to go address some really tough subjects? Was that like truly intentional, or did it kind of something came up and you're like, well, let's write a song about this, and then suddenly it's like, wow, we're writing about some tough, sticky stuff?
I don't think it was intentional. It's not like we planned the sort of the stories.
It wasn't charted out from the beginning. I'd say we started writing. We started writing and putting things out on paper, and it was just, you were saying your process of becoming more and more honest over the years and more comfortable with sharing, those honest reflections and so on.
Right.
I think it was similar in we began writing the songs and we put them down, and we would then say, hey, let's go one notch deeper. How does that feel? And then we would sit with it and we'd say, oh, let's go one notch deeper. And how does that feel? And then eventually we get to a place that's like, okay, that's too deep. Let's back off and let's be okay right where we are, and just being comfortable with that. So there was not this grand master plan at the beginning to say, okay, we're going to write a song about losing a childhood friend and really go deep on that. Or we're going to write a song about a trans kid who is kicked out of his home. But we did start with stories, that one, for instance, Frozen River, about it's our imaginings based on this story I had read about a youth who is kicked out of his home. We went to that space, and then we let the song find itself with us as we spent a long time making this album. It took us years.
Sometimes there would be moments where, so in many ways, Greg and I are we'll go back and forth. Sometimes one of us will take the lead on melody, and the other would take the lead on lyrics, and vice versa. And sometimes we would share stuff with each other, and we'd I remember asking the question a lot of each other, what is this really about? Like what's the story here?
Why does it matter?
Yeah, exactly. What's the story we're trying to tell?
But we definitely had an intention, I think, in kind of like Facebook social world. We all paint, we're all guilty of this, right? We paint these really lovely pictures of how handsome we are and how funny we are and what great friends we are and what great trips we go on and all that kind of stuff. And I think our world on those social media are so manicured. And there was an intention with this album to be decidedly unmanicured, and really actually bad stuff happens in our lives and we have to somehow get through it.
It's interesting that you bring up the social media piece, because I'm seeing, as all of us do, but I'm seeing it at a deeper level for myself as I'm launching a couple of programs right now. And I'm launching a mastermind for guys that by the time this airs, we'll be about halfway through it. But as I'm talking about the tough stuff, like I've posted some stuff on Instagram about, if you're in a relationship with the guy and there's no connection and the sex is gone and you're better off as roommates, maybe it's time for you to step up into a group like this and get the support you need to do the thing you most want to do. And I got one person responded back, why are you talking about this stuff? I'm like, because it's real. Let's get real. I mean, let's not paint the, this happy, joy picture, because I know in the work that I do, the sooner we can get to the real stuff, the quicker people go, yes, that's me, and I need some help. I need some support. I want some guidance. I want to get through this. And I find that's what I've listened to of your songs so far. That's what you guys are doing. You're getting to the real stuff. Is it pretty? Sometimes not. But is it real? Absolutely so. And I feel like in our community and in the world in general, but especially in our LGBTQ community, sometimes we don't talk enough
Yeah.
about the pain. We talk about our coming out pain. That's pretty prevalent everywhere. But what we don't talk about is the loneliness. We don't talk about the still not feeling accepted even with our own circles. We don't talk about when, to partner domestic violence shows up. We don't talk about these things because
We don't.
we're supposed to be this,
Yep.
and whatever the world thinks we are, good or bad, but most of them, oh, they're just fabulous. Well, no, life isn't just fabulous. So I'm also curious, as you guys put the music together and as you came to some of those tough ones, let's kind of, talk about the domestic violence and stuff like that.
Sure.
Why were you so compelled to let's address this? What was the driver?
Well, that was a really tough part of the process because as we were starting to put down song ideas and so on, you start to mine what, any of us, again, any artist, any medium, you start to mine, what do I have to say? Like what is it about my experience that is in some way valuable, compelling, beautiful, scary, awesome, terrible? You lean to these superlatives, right? Because you're trying to mine for the things that will be symbolic or meaningful or, hit you in the gut, right? And so in my particular instance, I wanted to do it in a respectful way, in that I didn't want this to be a drag anyone through the mud. We all have problems. We all have challenges. We all make really bad decisions in the course of our lives. So this wasn't about, I'm going to do a public record of shame of anyone. This was about dealing with, and this was that process of getting more braver and braver, saying, you know what, male domestic violence happens.
Yep.
It happens. And we don't talk about it. We very rarely talk about it, whether we've been in it or in society at large. If we do talk about domestic violence, it is often centered around women's experiences. Yep. And women often, are in the same situation where it's just not talked about. We're ashamed, we're embarrassed, we're scared. We don't want to hurt other people with telling these stories. But at the end of the day, I got to a place of saying, I think I can do this in a way that talks about, that allows me to have my head held high, and yet say, this happens, and it's hard. And we need to pay attention and help each other through these really hard situations. So ultimately it came down to, I found that middle ground that made me feel comfortable in sharing those stories.
I love that you said that, because I know when I created this last talk that I did, there's moments where I'm talking about my infidelity when I was married to my wife. And at one point somebody could have taken it like, okay, he's telling all the good things that happened for him, but I knew I had to bring it full circle.
Yeah.
I had to bring it back to, I'm not saying, look at what I did, I'm great, I came out of the closet. And the moment that I bring it back full circle, I could almost hear a sigh in the audience, like, okay, this guy isn't an asshole. And when I said, all those things I'm doing, all the infidelity, they still weren't right. And that was the moment I could hear that collective sigh of, okay, this guy acknowledges that he sees that this wasn't the right way, but you have to bring it full circle. And I think that's what I noticed in the stuff you guys are putting out. You're addressing it, but you're kind of bringing it full circle to say, here's the reality, but let's focus on what can be done when we see the reality and move past it.
And there's threads of hope and forgiveness.
Absolutely.
And what's next. And that's where we wanted to leave people, not just drag them through the valley. We wanted to acknowledge the valley for sure, but we wanted to leave them with that ray of hope.
So Danny, I'm curious about, as this all started to happen and you guys put these things together and the songs come together and the albums come together over the years, as you watched this come about, did you feel like, wait, are we going too deep in the LGBTQ stuff? Is this going to be something that mainstream can handle?
Huh.
Or did you just say, we're going, this is what we're doing?
No, I think we're going. Like we
That's a great question.
something we're really proud of is our use of pronouns throughout the album and all of our songs. And it's strange because on the one hand, we're really conscious that we're singing about him and he, and then
hey boy, and
hey boy,
right.
Yeah. And at the same time, like sometimes we wouldn't notice because that's because we're just singing about love and relationships and the realities of our own lives, and so it's definitely on the one hand we're really conscious
of
well, how is our music going to be received, and on the other hand it's like, who cares?
Exactly.
Let's just be authentic, and it's not as if there's a fear that we're going to maybe turn off a particular like personal audience.
Right.
I'm not worried about that because I think as authentic as we can be, then if people want to hear something real, then they'll listen and hopefully like what we do.
And I think there's a really cool little moment as you know, the album's been circulating and getting pick up here and there, and reviewers and bloggers and, you know, music people and, you know, folks who just hear the songs and connect with us and give us feedback and all that kind of stuff. One of the things I love is that I think it's a sign of the times and the sign of the change in our society that no one is, even on the songs that are clearly, it's a guy singing to a guy, no one's saying, that's a great gay love song. You know what I mean? Or I don't like that gay love song, or what, you know, people, you know, have different reactions to the song, which is the nature of music, right? But what is not happening is people saying, oh, I love that you guys are writing these gay songs. You know, they say, I love this lyric about love, or I love that you took on this, subject of loss, or I love it. And it's fascinating to me that it's just part of the fabric, you know, and I think it's a wonderful thing that's happening in our society, that you can have a spy movie where the character happens to be gay, not it's the point of the movie is that this character
is gay. Exactly.
Which is, I think, a huge evolution in the way we're all seeing sexuality.
What movie is that?
What? I was just kidding.
Oh, there should be.
But there is. There is. There's like an indie film
Okay.
someone did where it's just that's.
Well, actually, Greg hasn't told you yet. He's leaving the group. He's going to become a filmper. He's already got the deal done, and he might consider you for some of the music for the film, but he hasn't told you that yet either. So
as long as it's not acting.
This is awkward. This is awkward.
But you know, it is interesting that you bring it up that way, because that's why Life Uncloseted became what it was. I realized, and we talked about this a little bit before we came on and recorded, that, you know, it having been the coming out lounge for so many years, that I realized, wait, we need to go bigger. We got to go a little wider. We got to start telling some other stories. And even this conversation that we're having today, it's about, at the core so far, what we've talked about, I feel like it's about showcasing humanity, just humanity, who we are as people. And it just happens that, you know, what you guys are is a couple of gay guys who put this band together. You've done your duo and everything. But as you're writing, you're talking about stuff that kind of is focused in the LGBTQ community, but it has the crossover potential to, like, this is just about love. And this is about stuff that happens, like physical abuse and stuff. And it just happens to include two guys or two gals or whatever it may be. And this is where the normalization comes. And I feel like the more we in our community can start to normalize all this stuff, the more acceptance, compassion, empathy, love, all that stuff that will happen. And I wish we could do more of it. And I think that's why the more that artists like yourselves and myself who bring this stuff to this format and go, wow, I'm listening to this song in my car, it sounds really good. But suddenly when they start to really listen, it's like, oh, so this is what it's about. It's almost like this subtle teaching moments that happen, and then it shifts perspectives, hopefully.
Yep.
Hopefully. But so what's been the biggest challenges you guys have faced over the years, other than it took a few years to get this out the door? And either one of you can answer that question. I'm sure each of you have your own version of it, but I know right now Danny's feeling like, well, my biggest challenge is I didn't know about this film he's making.
Yeah, exactly. You put me in a tight spot.
In terms of, I don't know. It's a good question, but honestly, I kind of see the music piece of my life as like being the opposite of challenging. There are lots of aspects of life, like our day jobs and family and the political climate that that really can cause a lot of stress. But if I'm honest, I think I disappear into music in a way that sort of music is my space to chill and really, really, really give time for myself. It's almost like it's a little selfish in a good way, right? It's like, okay, I'm gonna carve out this time. So I don't know if I can't really think of anything that's been particularly challenging, except to say, well, there's all this other stuff in life that sometimes gets in the way, and that prevents me from maybe putting even more to the music. I hope that going forward, that's going to start to shift. Putting our music out there as an album has been a sort of a pivotal moment where I think I can give myself permission to say, you know what, this is actually a thing that's really significant in my life, and maybe some other things need to move aside to make more.
Yeah, there's that moment as an amateur musician, I think, or amateur artist or amateur of any sort, which I look at as a great thing. I think we should all be amateur at a bunch of things in our life. That's what makes life interesting, right? We don't have to, but there is a moment where we all kind of, I'm sure you had this moment at some point in your journey where you're like, oh, I'm a broadcaster. I create this, really interesting content. And you kind of sit in that chair differently, at a certain point in the process. I think I had a similar moment like that too, where it's like what started out as kind of a lark, there's a moment where it's like, oh, I'm a songwriter and I'm a musician, and I can own that title. And but for me, that was a little bit of a process of going from kind of this lark of an idea to like, oh, I'm really liking what we're putting out into the world, and it's fun to see people respond to it. I think the only thing I would add from a difficulty thing, I think my journey along this, and we hit on it earlier, but just to succinctly say, I do think in the context of this conversation and your podcast, kind of outing myself around some of the experiences I had was really scary, and it was really hard. And I would say that was absolutely the big challenge for me of figuring that out.
It's something similar that I've heard. I've had several LGBTQ musicians on the podcast, people in the country genre, which is actually, it's really scary for them because like, that's very much like, okay, we don't really talk about this. And then others that are like, yeah, fuck you, this is who I am, right? But I do find it so fascinating that regardless of where you're coming from, even as I started this, and it's interesting that you brought up like, oh yeah, I suddenly just woke up one day and realized, hey, this is what I'm doing. It's the same sort of thing, because you wake up to this and then it's like, okay, now there's almost a little bit of a weird crisis that happens. It's like, okay, this is who I am, but I'm also this. And now those 2 points intersect, and this whole podcast came about. I know you guys don't know this story unless you've gone clear back to the beginning, but it came about because a girlfriend of mine, she had a internet radio show. And she went on maternity leave, and so it went on hiatus, and she came back and said, hey, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. And then we talked about doing something together. And she was the divorced Catholic girl. I'm the gay guy that came out late in life. We thought, hey, that's a good twist. We'll have a lot of fun talking about this sort of stuff. And then she said, I just don't really want to do it. And she goes, why don't you take over the show and make it your own? And I'll never forget that first show. And then about third show, I want to say, that I finally said, screw the scripts. I'm just going to talk. And it was actually about the 10th show that I'm like, I'm actually a podcaster.
Exactly.
I'm actually doing, at that time it wasn't a podcast, it was radio, but it was like, I'm actually doing broadcast medium here. And I'm also putting my voice out there and my life out there. And it was really similar to when I was on the Ricky Lake show. It's like, I'm out there now, and not because of celebrity, it's just I'm out there. And so there's this really interesting space you cross through when you get there. And now I'm like, fuck it, I'll say whatever I want. I do what I want, and I respect the audience. But I also feel like when we cross through those chasms, those are the most beautiful spaces in life, because it's like, okay, you said you wanted this, or maybe you didn't say you want it, but you got it. Are you going to show up? And I loved what you said about what Danny said about giving permission, because that's a big thing for me. That's like one of the core elements of my coaching practice. Is I start with people, I'm like, what are you going to give yourself permission to do? And I think once we give ourselves permission to go into these spaces, that is truly when the magic happens.
I think that's right. That's beautifully put.
Well, you'll get your $5 for saying that. So, so as we get ready to wrap up, guys, I know that the album has just been released. Any big plans for, like, are you doing any, like, big tours? Are you doing just like some small, get around, do stuff? What's the next steps for you guys?
So we're about to, so by the time this podcast is put out there, we would have already been to Wisconsin, Madison and Appleton.
Cool.
In mid-October. So if you're listening to this, it was a couple of weeks ago.
And the cool thing,
if you're listening to it, that means you missed them. Sorry.
the cool thing about Wisconsin is we've been invited by the Governor's Council on Domestic Violence to play at the Capitol building at an awards ceremony. So
right on.
That's happening on October 16th, and then we're going to an artist retreat called The Refuge up in Appleton, and we have a show here in Chicago coming up in 2 weeks. So we're going to plan to play. We're going to try to play about once every 2 months here in Chicago, and then we'll kind of look to next summer to kind of launch a little bit of a little Midwest tour.
Cool. Guys, I just realized we've been talking about this through the whole thing, and we haven't actually, I don't think we've mentioned the name of the album one time. So it is Lost at Sea. And I love that that's what it's called, because so much of what you're talking about is different metaphorical positionings of what it means to be lost at sea, whether that's in your sexuality or in a domestic violence situation or in your own stuff.
Or even in love. We sometimes think of lost at sea as not necessarily being a bad thing, just like allowing yourself.
So good to get lost with someone, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I was going to make a smart ass remark, but I'll keep it to myself. I've never been lost at sea in my love life. It's always been perfect and fabulous. Yeah, right. And if you guys believe that, please quit listening to my podcast. No, don't quit listening to the podcast. But, it is so true that so much of life is about being lost at sea, and sometimes in a good way and in a bad way. And I feel like the more we can open up and have these kind of conversations and share the truth of who we are as people, the more everyone, ironically, can uncloset themselves from the closets they're in life. So this has been a really fun conversation, guys. I've really enjoyed it. And you're both pretty easy to look at too on the eyes. So I'll just put that out there. So, but I really, truly enjoyed it. I look forward to whatever else comes for you guys, and hopefully lots of great success comes out of it. There will be a link to their website. The video is already up on the page. I've already built the page for these guys, but please go check them out, follow them, give them some love on Instagram, wherever you can find them. And before we wrap out, let's start with Danny. If you could put something out there for someone that's, maybe struggling, like, okay, I'm in this weird space, a closet in my life, or maybe afraid to come out or afraid to say, here's what's going on in my life. How would you like to encourage them to just take that step forward?
Yeah, great question. I think just knowing that there's so many other people who are also afraid who might be going through something so similar, and realizing that that's actually really normal and human to have that fear, but just and to take that big first step of reaching out to someone to talk can be really, really scary, but if you push through it, it has lots of rewards.
Mm-hmm. And for Greg, the question is, what's the name of the movie? So that we can no, I'm kidding. So, but kind of the same thing, I know, I think it's interesting when we all kind of share our own pieces of what does it feel like when we think we're the only ones. So, again, same kind of question to you, Greg. If you're going to give somebody some advice real quick before we wrap it up.
Sure. I have a 2-word mantra that I landed on many, many years ago that I love sharing, which is embrace complexity. Life is complex and we are complex, and that's okay. And we get to be all kinds of different things in our lives. And it's okay to embrace all those different parts of our identities rather than trying to put everything in these neat little boxes. It's okay to just lean into it and have some faith that it's all going to work out.
I love that. I loved what you said too, Danny. Don't take me wrong. But I think both of you guys just dropped some really cool wisdom bombs there at the end. And that's what I feel like this show is all about, is opening the doorways for people to see other people's wisdom and sharing their own journeys and showing that we are so much more alike than different. So thanks again, guys, for being here. And again, They Won't Win is the name of their duo. This new album is called Lost at Sea. And we'll connect you up to everything about these two guys that are doing some pretty amazing stuff to really put the kind of stories out there through music that maybe, just maybe, people need to hear and they haven't ever heard them before. So thanks again, guys, for being here. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Hey, Life Uncloseted family. Another episode of Life Uncloseted has come to an end, and it is time for all of us to sashay away and go face our fears, make those bold moves, and stand up to living our life without apology. But before you do, I've got a favor to ask of you. Would you hop over to iTunes or Spotify or Podbean or wherever it is that you're listening to this and just give us a little bit of love if you like what we're doing here at Life Uncloseted. Here's what it does. It helps other people find the show. It helps other people get to know what we're all about. And you just might help change a life. In fact, if you really want to change a life, we'd love it if you just ask a friend to take a listen and see what they think. So that's it. Love you all deeply. I'm Rick Clemens, the host of Life Uncloseted, and never stop stepping out, stepping up, and stepping into living your life uncloseted.